True crimers, welcome to Break the Case. I'm your host. I'm Jen Coffendaffer. If you haven't been on the channel before, we are very much a fact-based channel. We have a lot of great guests that are retired FBI, retired law enforcement, criminal psychologists, psychiatrists, lawyers, you name it, the gamut that can help us understand the crimes that we're really looking at closely. And tonight we are going to be continuing our coverage of Luigi Mangione. That's the individual that's accused of killing CEO of United Healthcare, Brian Thompson. Now, this occurred on December 4th, and specifically, he was initially charged in Pennsylvania, where he was found with various weapon charges. And then ultimately, after that, we were anticipating charges, of course, out of New York, second-degree murder charge. That was the indication. But after the grand jury met, they came down with some powerful charges, specifically terrorism charges that make it illegal in New York to commit a crime of murder if it's in furtherance of terrorism. Now, I'm going to read some things exactly for you because I think it's important we understand why initially he wasn't charged with first-degree murder. And Dave Aronberg, thankfully, is going to be joining me. The reason I love having David Aronberg on is because he is a practicing criminal state prosecuting chief attorney in Florida. And listen, he walks the walk. He looks at these cases. He understands criminal law inside and out. And he's very familiar with New York law. He's been poring over this, and he's going to join us in just a couple minutes. But I wanted to set up the case first. Specifically for those who don't know it, Luigi Mangione, according to the evidence, and is accused of essentially laying in wait and murdering CEO Brian Thompson by shooting him in the back with not a ghost gun. I hate it when they say ghost gun. They say that because of the serial number. But really, we call it in the business a Frankenstein gun because it's made with various parts of guns and it's all put together to make a gun. For Luigi, this makes it worse. It's like a case once I was involved with where the individual tried to scrape off his fingerprints. Well, that made his fingerprints even more distinctive, which, by the way, fingerprints are already distinctive, but now he just made it really easier for an examiner. That's what Luigi Mangione did when he decided to make his gun a Frankenstein gun. Now it's extremely unique in terms of the tool markings of the weapon and how the weapon fires, the firing pin strikes, the tool marks that would be left by the extractor and the ejector and the breech face. So in any event, that was a subject of another one, but I just wanted to say the evidence is very strong. There's a fingerprint on a water bottle that he had. They're looking at DNA. Of course, there was a wrapper that he had of a Kind bar. There's going to be DNA examined from that water bottle. We know the tool marks of his gun matched the casings found at the crime scene. We have him on video. They have him with his mask pulled down on video. The case is strong. But what I think, at least for me and many others, we were surprised to see first degree. And I'll tell you why. New York is odd. In other words, most states, as long as you have premeditation, it's a slam dunk that you would be charged with first degree. That's not the way it is in New York. I'm going to list most of the parameters that you could charge first degree in New York. One is if you kill a judge, law enforcement, firefighter, EMS, nurse, doctor, anyone in the correction system, any of these people that are doing their job and that are murdered in related to that, any witness, that you would murder that could testify against you in a case, anyone you pay, that makes it a first degree murder. In commission of a rape, a robbery, an arson, something like that, a felony crime, and then you decide to or murder somebody, then that will be first degree. If you previously had a murder conviction, then you can be charged. And then finally, torture. If you tortured somebody, that elevates to first degree. So how is this? These new charges elevate now Luigi Mangione to first degree. Well, I'm going to tell you why. Essentially, in New York, this is what they did. They said they are charging him with a crime of terrorism, specifically if, and these are the parameters, it's done with the intent to intimidate or coerce a civilian population, or, and this is where I think they're honing in on, and we're going to discuss it a lot with Dave here, but influence the policy of a unit of government by intimidation or coercion, or affect the conduct of the unit of government by the murder that you committed. So I think that that's the nexus that they're using to try to get in, and well, not try, they have, because they've charged this. So not terrorism. I don't think they're going to meet this standard with the intent to intimidate or coerce a civilian population. I don't think we saw that here, but rather I think how they're trying to get in on this is, was it to influence the policy of a unit of government through intimidation? So that's what's been charged. That's where we're at. Specifically for those of you, while we're waiting on Dave, and he should be on any minute, if you have not read the indictment, I'm going to quickly go over indictments. Many people believe are these long, involved, allegations that are spelled out. And that's just not what an indictment does. An indictment charges, there's three ways to charge. There's criminal information, there's an indictment, and then there's also by affidavit or a criminal complaint that an officer writes, right? So in this case, we actually have an indictment. They're usually very brief. They spell out the crime essentially they're charged with, and then they say, these are the charges. In this case, and Dave's on, so we're going to bring him right up here. In this case, he is charged with 10 counts. Most of the counts are in regard to the possession of the firearm, but the juicy counts are, to me, counts 1 and count 2. 1 is murder 1, first degree murder, again, regarding the act of terrorism. They're saying it was an act of terrorism that the murder was committed, and that's why it's first degree. And then they say the same thing about second degree, and then they charge second degree murder, and then they go on the firearms. But without further ado, we're going to bring up Dave, and we're going to have a discussion, a legal discussion about this to help us further understand. Dave, there he is. How are you, Dave?
Hey, it's great to be back with you, Jennifer. Great show.
Always great to see you. We're really breaking down a lot of the information. We had a gun expert on. I talked a lot about the tactics, and then we are going to have on tomorrow somebody to psychologically break down Mr. Mangione. But tonight, I want to focus on what I think threw us a little bit of a curveball. I wasn't expecting it because it doesn't. And I read everybody what murder 1 is in New York. What did you think when you first heard that they were going to use a terrorism statute to get to murder 1?
I was surprised that the prosecutors would charge first-degree murder. I think they have Luigi dead to rights on second-degree murder. It is what it is. The evidence is really strong against this guy. But in charging first-degree murder, indicting for first-degree murder, you add now some uncertainty. It could be a gift to defense lawyers, because now they can make the claim that you should not believe prosecutors on anything. They're overcharging here. And all you need is one juror with some reasonable doubt or is upset at the prosecutors because they don't think the charge fits the crime. And that is enough for a hung jury. Now, if everyone has reasonable doubt, then that's acquittal. You got to be careful about overcharging. We saw this a bit in the Daniel Penny case, also in Manhattan, where they charged Penny with manslaughter, which for a lot of us thought it was an overcharge, where perhaps, if anything, it would be criminally negligent homicide, the lesser charge. Well, the jury in that case hung on manslaughter. And then by the time the judge threw that charge out, they only had this lesser charge available, which should have been a lot easier. But all the jurors said, nah, we're not doing that. And then the guy was acquitted. So that's the danger in looking like you're overcharging a case. And I think here it's not so easy to show that there was an act of terrorism.
So there is one specific verbiage that I found in the statute that I wanted to read to you, just really a half a sentence here, and get your thoughts on this. Specifically, what I thought they might go with is this piece concerning for policy change. In other words, are you committing the act of terror in furtherance of policy change, if you will? It was that his goal. What do you think about that piece of it, that he was trying to further this change in the healthcare system?
Yes, I think he was. I think he was hoping that this would lead to changes overall. But the core principle of terrorism is that you have to show that you were intending to intimidate or threaten the public or a government agency. And here it seems like he was trying to motivate the public. He was trying to get the public to side with him. Very different than scaring the public. So yes, he may intend to have change in policy, but that alone does not make it terrorism. You have to try to instill fear, intimidation into the public. That could lead to some change in policy, sure. But just because can you imagine you just charge anyone for terrorism if they had a goal in mind, with a broader goal in mind? So I don't think that's the purpose of the statute.
Yeah, I tell you, when I first heard it, I even wrote on Twitter, I said, is this fair? In other words, really, to me, trying to subvert what, at least in New York, is the law and the very specific nature in which you can charge murder one to get around the murder two charge. Let me ask this, Dave. Why wouldn't they be satisfied just with murder two? Look, that's a minimum mandatory, I think 15 years, something like that. But can it go up to 40 years from my understanding, plus 7 charges regarding those firearms that are a 5 to 7 year hit each, make them, instead of occurring at the same time, consecutive? Tell me, what am I missing here?
Yeah, I think that it's just, if you get the first degree murder conviction, you're going to get life in prison. Second degree murder conviction, not necessarily. And I think he is someone, Alvin Bragg, who swings for the fences. Whether you saw this in the Daniel Penny case, but you also saw this in the Donald Trump prosecution, where some people thought that Trump was overcharged, 34 counts. But it worked out for Alvin Bragg. He got conviction on all 34 counts. First degree murder in New York is different than the first degree murder in other states. In other states, it's just premeditated murder. In New York, you have to have a special element, killing a cop or first responder or an act of terrorism, to name a few. So I think he wants to try to get this guy the maximum sentence, life in prison, and thought that a first degree murder conviction would get him there, whereas a second degree murder conviction may not, especially with all the sympathy out there for him. But that same sympathy that exists in the public could end up being a real challenge for prosecutors, not just if they're overcharging, but also perhaps in a defense that Luigi was acting with extreme emotional disturbance. And if that's the case, that would be a manslaughter conviction, which is punishable by, I believe, about 5 to 25 years. That's much less than a murder conviction. So you have to be really careful in this case, because this guy has become a cause célèbre for some young people, especially, and people on the far left who have had enough with insurance companies. He's like the Kyle Rittenhouse of the far left.
Yeah, it's so interesting you say that, because I noticed that manslaughter isn't even on the table. So they haven't charged that at all. So if this jury just doesn't find that they've met the elements to convict in murder one or murder two, the terrorism statutes, now you're looking at the gun statutes and maybe not any conviction for the death of Brian Thompson.
Yeah, it's interesting, Jennifer. And I'd have to look more closely at the charges in New York law to see if manslaughter will be a lesser included offense here, because, it depends. In Florida, you'd have manslaughter as a lesser included in these in a murder charge. The prosecutors would obviously have to go along with it, but if you're not seeing it at present, I wonder if that's something that will change by the time it goes to trial, where manslaughter will be an alternative, or maybe the strategy for the district attorney is not to give jurors the alternative, the fallback of manslaughter, knowing that it should be all or nothing, because the evidence is really strong against Luigi Mangione. And if you allow jurors to find him guilty just of manslaughter, that may be the compromise verdict that the prosecutors don't want. They may want all or nothing, knowing that it's unlikely that this guy is going to be acquitted because the evidence is so strong.
The other thing, the minute I saw they were going to charge this terrorism count, I thought, oh my gosh, you have just opened the door for information that the prosecution might not have otherwise been able to put on the table or have to put on the table. And now the defense can put it on the table because it's relevant, right? All of this information that might make a jury even more sympathetic to him, right? Doesn't it bring in everything? Because they're going to want to counter that it was that specific when you look back at a lot of the wacko things he was thinking about.
It's a great point, but I do think the prosecutors thought that the motivation of the defendant would come in anyways, especially because they probably thought that Mangione would take the stand in his defense. In fact, that's his best defense. Here you have this well-educated, good-looking guy who's become a hero to so many, and to claim that he was doing it because of his own personal experience with the insurance companies, which is an industry hated by many Americans, that's his best way out. And so I think perhaps the prosecution thought, okay, all this stuff's going to come in anyways. He's going to testify. So let's not worry about that with the terrorism count, because, yeah, it was going to happen anyways. So, but I do express caution to my fellow prosecutors. If you are seen as a prosecutor in overreaching and overcharging, jurors could take it out against you. They could just say, no, we don't trust you anymore. And we're going to have jury nullification, for example, where despite the evidence, despite the law, we actually like the defendant more than we like the prosecutors, which I hope never happens. But, when the jurors go into that jury deliberation room, they've got a lot of freedom, a lot of independence. And even though the judge instructs them on the law and says you must follow the evidence, they could say, nah, we like the guy, not guilty. And then there's nothing the prosecutors can do about it.
Well, I'm sure you've seen that tape where they were transporting him, and then he was in the Sally Port going into the back door, where he absolutely wigs out, screaming. He's really snarling, and making sort of gibberish statements. I mean, we dissected them, but still didn't make much sense. My thought is, they better have him under control, meaning his defense team, because if they get him on the stand and they incite that sort of rhetoric and that crazy thing, is that going to be good, or maybe it's going to be bad for him?
It's a double-edged sword. It shows that he really is a true believer in this cause. It could show perhaps that he had this extreme emotional disturbance because of his own personal experience, his own surgery. Perhaps he has a lot of pain and pain pills, and that's what led to this. I mean, it's not to exonerate him. It's not to acquit him. It's just to say that could be a defense to get a jury to convict on a lesser charge as opposed to murder. And the fact that prosecutors have added the first-degree murder charge, I think, is a help to defense lawyers, because that first-degree murder charge is by no means an automatic. The second-degree murder charge, I thought, was an automatic. I thought that they got him on that. And but now it injects some new uncertainty into the whole case.
From day one, the very beginning, I said, why in the world are the Fed authorities, the FBI has been on it since minute one. Why in the world are not they taking this federal? First of all, he crossed state lines to commit this crime. He crossed state lines after he had to purchase all these different parts for this Frankenstein gun that he put together. Why in the world aren't they? And then I thought, Bragg isn't exactly buddies with Trump. Once Trump gets in, he might pull the rug right underneath, out from underneath Bragg and take this case. Have you ever had that happen? And do you think this will happen here? So I think it might.
That's a very interesting observation. We have cases where the feds have come in and taken it away. I mean, look at the second assassination attempt of Donald Trump. That was in my jurisdiction. Yeah. And I did a press conference with the feds where I said that we are working on state charges against this defendant, this suspect. And then right after the press conference, the feds said to me, they pretty whispered in my ear, "We're going to take it." Like, okay. And that was it. Because when it comes to turf wars, we don't do that in our office. And state prosecutors almost always defer to the feds if they want a case. So if the feds want it, they take it. Plus, there's a law on the books that says essentially that the feds get it if they want it. So you don't want to end up with a turf war. But since the state prosecution has gone down this road, and by the time that Trump takes office and he has a new attorney general in there, it may be a little too far down the line for the feds to now take it away. They could perhaps add to charges, but I think now this is a state case. But it is, I think it is, although, Jennifer, I can't rule out entirely because Trump has made his point that he thinks this guy is guilty and he doesn't like Alvin Bragg. And so would I put it past him? No. Although apparently the new U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York is legit. Like, he's the guy who formerly was with the SEC. So he's not a political hack by any means.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that also, we've heard now the new attorney for Mr. Mangione is not going to, have any issues with extradition, which, as you and I know, typically you never argue extradition unless you really think it's not your guy. Other than that, there's just no reason to do it. It's a formality. But remember, they were going to do that. And now, at least the word is they're not going to do that. And I wondered if it was to expedite getting him to New York, getting him under these charges so the federal authorities don't go in and grab it.
Wow. I didn't think like that. I thought it was the defense lawyers knew that fighting extradition is a no-win situation. It just forestalls the inevitable. And I was wondering why they were even fighting extradition. And perhaps that's before Karen Friedman, have trouble pronouncing her last name, got involved with, Big Leo. And before she got on the case, she's a really good lawyer. And I think she said, why are we wasting our time with extradition? It's going to happen. Let's just prepare for trial. There really wasn't a good reason to fight extradition. And so I don't think that, the feds being involved or not being involved was the reason why they decided to change policy. I think it's because Karen Friedman of Figlio, the really high-powered new defense lawyer for Luigi Mangione, decided otherwise, and I think she made the right decision.
And for those of you who don't know, just another side note, she is married to Diddy's attorney, Sean Diddy Combs's attorney. I just thought that was interesting. I mean, they've got to have some very interesting conversations at dinner.
Quite the power couple. I mean, really.
That is one power couple.
Yeah. She's a very nice person too. I've gotten to know her over the past year, and she's Karen is a really nice person, and she'll do a really good job there. But that's what happens when you have lots of money, like this guy Luigi Mangione. He's a cult hero to so many, like Robin Hood, but he's the opposite of Robin Hood. The guy he killed, Brian Thompson, was born in a very working class environment. He worked his way up. He went to state schools. He didn't go to private schools like Luigi Mangione. He didn't have a family with lots of money. And he worked his way up there. And yet the people are rooting for Luigi Mangione, who had everything in his life paid for, taken care of, got to go to Hawaii, do hallucinogenic drugs, and never have to worry about where his next meal was coming from. And far from a hero, he planned this murder and lied in wait with a mask on to cover his identity, and then shot Brian Thompson in the back. That seems pretty cowardly to me, and then ran away. So before you try to lionize this guy as a hero, this guy is no hero.
Yeah. I couldn't have said it better. It's so true. And to watch people now raise $150,000 for his defense fund, I just find it all just theatrics. He doesn't need any money. He's not probably even going to take that money. It's really just hoping the platform and the people that are rah-rahing in the background and riding the coattails of a coward. That's how I see it. I'm calling it.
Exactly. You and I are on the same page. That's why I love reading your tweets out there, Jennifer, because it seems like you're always expressing how I feel. And by the way, I hope your son is doing better. My thoughts went out to you when I saw the football injury he sustained. It's a violent sport, but that was a violent hit, and I'm sorry that you had to go through that.
Dave, thank you so much. Yeah, he actually is back in the saddle, not with football. He never got to play another game after that, but he's back in the saddle wrestling, had his first 4 in a row matches and won all 4, 3 by pinning, and then won 15-5 decision. So he's back in the saddle. We were very concerned, how that was all going to play out just mentally once you go through something like that. But he was knocked out, so he really doesn't even remember that hit, and that's probably good.
Yeah, well, he's tough, I tell you, to come back and then go into a even more grueling sport. They say wrestling is the most grueling sport of all, and there are no pads. So yeah, he takes after his mom. He's tough, tougher than as they say, tougher than a nickel steak.
Oh, you're so funny. So Dave, did we miss anything on this? I mean, it's kind of, to me, a little bit cut and dried, but what do you think is the defense that it's going to be, that they're going to try to use? Do you think they'll use any diminished capacity?
I don't think so. I don't think you'll see an insanity defense because I don't think it works. You have a guy who meticulously planned this, who had fake IDs, who wore a mask. That shows that he knew the difference between right and wrong. And that's a standard for an insanity defense. So he'll say that he was under extreme emotional disturbance. That could get you the lesser crime of manslaughter. And at the same time, if you argue that, you're really arguing too for jury nullification in the hope that here's someone who, after back surgery, just took on the cause of fighting against the insurance companies and leave it up to the jury to decide whether he took it too far. I think that's his best defense. I don't think insanity, diminished capacity are available to him based on his actions before, during, and after this crime, which shows that he knew the consequences of his actions. And I don't think there's any case that this is mistaken identity. I mean, gosh, you got a confession in his manifesto. You've got a picture of him wearing the killer's clothes from the hostel, a clear picture of his face. You have his DNA and fingerprints on the scene. You've got the gun in his possession whose bullet casings were found on the scene, and you have all of his writings, and then you have his outburst when he's being led into jail. I mean, if there was a chance that he would deny this is he lost that a while ago. I mean, it's clear he's the guy who did it. Now the question is, can he get away with it? I'd say no, he won't get away with it, but he does have a chance to get a lesser sentence based on a manslaughter conviction or possibly jury nullification where they just find him guilty of some of those lesser crimes, the gun crimes and other things.
And Dave, final question for you. Do you put him on the stand if you're his attorney?
I do. He's an Ivy League educated, good looking guy who wants to perform. He tried to perform on the walk into the jail. And I think that he needs to be on the stand, because if you're going to have a guy who is going to try to appeal to the emotions of the jury to get them to feel sympathy towards him, you got to put him on the stand. If you're going to try to let him explain about his operations and his pain and his feelings towards the insurance companies, you got to put him on the stand. I mean, you're going to put him on the stand and they'll ask him about all the evidence and his statements. Yeah, he said all those things. He did all those things. This is not a question of mistaken identity. He did it, but you got to try to convince at least one juror to feel some sympathy for him. And that's all it takes for a hung jury. You get all jurors, and that's an acquittal. Although, again, I do not think he's going to walk free. This guy is going to be convicted of something. I'm hoping it's murder, but I do think he'll spend at least some time in prison. As for me, Jennifer, you and I are both tough on crime. I think he needs to spend the rest of his life in an orange jumpsuit.
Yeah, I agree. And this is the reason why. I think he is a true danger to the community. And with somebody like this, with, I hate to say narcissistic because that makes it sound like, you know, I'm a psychologist, but I'm saying the reason he committed this crime, in my opinion, in large part, is because he thought he could do it. He thought he could get away with it. And for that reason alone, I think if he somehow skated on this, I think he could get out and plan again and even be more emboldened. So let's hope that orange jumpsuit continues to be his frock for the rest of his life.
Agreed. And also, something even worse, even if he does get acquitted, even worse than him trying to commit violence again, he could like run for office. I mean, who would want that?
Oh, God. Exactly. Well, Dave, thank you for spending so much of your late evening here with us. Thank you for everybody who tuned in. And Dave, I can't tell you, you're my favorite attorney. Thank you so much for being here, and I just appreciate it.
Thank you, Jennifer. And to your viewers, I have my YouTube channel, True Crime MTN. MTN, we're part of the Midas Touch Network. So thank you for checking us out. And please have me back on. I'd love to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I said all your kudos at the beginning anyway. Thank you again. And until next time, may justice be served.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Everyone, oh my gosh, Dave Aronberg, I'm so glad he joined us. He always has such great insight. He knows the law inside and out. He's a practicing prosecutor, which to me just means a lot to see that side of it. Yes, I promise I am going to have a defense attorney on as well. I already have one in mind that I think is very well respected, who's extremely accomplished and well respected. And I'm hoping to get him on because I always like to paint both sides. I am, you know, a retired FBI agent, so my lens is definitely from a law enforcement background. Dave Aronberg is from a prosecutor's background. We'll get a defense attorney on because I think it is important to look at the other, you know, the other half, the other side of things. So in any way, I'm going to check out a couple of your comments to my mods really quick. I just want to say, because now I can't comment on my own thing. YouTube keeps saying that it seems like I'm a bot, which cracks me up. It's my own channel. But anyway, to my mods, thank you for all you do to make the channel safe for everybody to say what they think without concern. Oh, thank you, everybody. Thank you. All right. Everybody is just basically saying thank you and great show. And I appreciate it. And if you did like it, I hope you, I don't have this all down, press the like button. Please subscribe. Please become a member. I think it's $1 or something like that if you want to. But anyway, I just appreciate you one and all for tuning in. We're going to have a great show tomorrow night. I have a behavioral criminal psychologist coming on. And she is going to run down Luigi Mangione with her area of expertise. I can't wait for this one because I've got some pretty hard questions. We went back and forth a little bit today via text with her position. My position is not exactly lining up. So I've got some hard questions for her, but she has a slant that I haven't heard anywhere. And so I'm very excited to get her on. I always like to have on these profilers, criminal psychologists. It's actually a very, very small world. Next week, I'm hoping to have on Dr. Bracata on a different case. I'm also going to be hitting hard Sebastian Rogers. So please be tuned in for that. It'll likely be Monday night. I'm hoping to get a special guest on there too, someone from Tennessee that I know. I'm hoping will come on. We'll see. Sometimes it's hard to get people to come on. I have somebody in law enforcement chomping at the bit, I think, to come on who is very involved in the Delphi case that is still under a gag order. But I think after the sentencing, I think the gag order is off. I've got them coming on. The other person that I am psyched for you all to even see in action because he's astounding. He ran the behavioral science unit. He actually started the behavioral science unit concerning digital forensics. He's the one that I sent the video to, the AI video that from my eyes, I'm like, there's like couch, going in and out. Seemed like the hand wasn't fully, but it was something that was so important to me that I thought it was very important to bother him. I think it was a Saturday or Sunday. I bothered him and sent it. And he sent it. He's got all these programs. He's a professional expert witness in this area. You're going to see him on a lot of cases. I won't name which ones, but you know them all. He's the man. And recently retired, only a year out of the Bureau. He's amazing. Probably one of the smartest guys I've ever really been around. I think he's Ivy League or MIT, and former United States attorney, and then went in the FBI. He's something. But according to his machines, it wasn't AI. When I think it clearly was AI, I just want to get him on and say, listen, how can the machines that you're using, all these databases, be fooled? And how can you ever really tell them? Should we just be using our eyes? What do these programs even tell us? I'm going to let him get into it, because when he talks, my eyes start to just go like this in circles, but I'll get him to slow down so he can explain why, from his standpoint, the programs convinced him, even though I was trying to convince him of the other. So in any event, we're going to have him on after the holidays. He wanted to come on in January. So we've got some exciting stuff coming up. I'm going to try to do a lot more because there's a lot going on now. And right now, I'm not getting ready for trial until February, March on my other cases. So a little bit of opportunity here to try to spend more time bringing you, hopefully, information and interesting guests and discussion about these cases, because I, for one, find them fascinating. I find this case and the Brian Kohberger case are so absolutely fascinating to me. They're fascinating because of what this means for the future. They're fascinating because of the type of people who I believe the evidence shows committed these crimes, the people who were charged, how they were committed, the nuances of the cat and mouse game, how well they planned certain parts, how well they didn't. Anyway, I'm fascinated. So hope you join us back tomorrow. The show is at 5:00. Again, we're going to have a criminal behavioral psychologist come on. I mean, she's got so many accolades, I can't even say them all. I'm going to let her talk about them. She's currently at Furman University in the philosophy department, and but her background is this. So I can't wait to hear from her about her reflections on Luigi Mangione's mental state during all of this. Until next time, everyone, I hope you can join us tomorrow. Thank you for being here tonight. May justice be served.